Hello, my name is Carolyn Wilkins. Welcome to my video about the life and legacy of Robert Tecumseh Browne. Since his death in 1978, Robert T. Browne's life has been buried in obscurity and shrouded in mystery. For some, he's considered an ascended master, a not normal human being, but something higher and better, almost a semi-godlike status. For others, Browne was simply an egotist with delusions of grandeur. Over the next 3 episodes, I'm going to explore and share with you some of the findings that I have on the life of this remarkable man. Once again, my name is Carolyn Wilkins. I hope you enjoy this video, and thank you for watching. When you look at Robert T. Browne's picture, it's hard to imagine that this elegant and imposing man was born in a wooden shack outside of LaGrange, Texas. Harder still to remember that his parents were former slaves who could not read or write. When Robert T. Browne was born in 1882, the Civil War was a recent memory. Race hatred was strong throughout the country, and in Texas, segregation was the rule of law. Robert T. Browne would have walked more than 2 miles to attend the school set aside for colored pupils. Due to the paltry funds allotted by the state of Texas for the education of black children, desks and even textbooks would have been in short supply. To add insult to injury, LaGrange's colored elementary school employed only 2 teachers to meet the need of its 196 pupils. Despite these disadvantaged beginnings, Browne would go on to write more than 10 books, including a complex metaphysical treatise that prefigured the discoveries of modern physics. How had this remarkable man been able to rise above the destiny prescribed for him by his environment? The answer is that even in this small, segregated Texas town, Robert T. Browne had mentors. Like my parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents, Browne had been raised in the bosom of the Black Methodist Church. Nestled along the banks of Cedar Creek, 4 miles outside of LaGrange, there was a small black community. And at the center of this community was Besod Methodist Episcopal Church. Funded with the pennies these African Americans had earned chopping cotton and washing clothes, Besod Church would have been a place of solace and pride for Robert and his family. Along with his teachers at LaGrange Colored Elementary School, Browne's pastor would have been among the first to recognize the boy's unusual intelligence. Surely he would have encouraged Robert to investigate the college the Methodist Episcopal Church was building in Austin for African American students. When I imagine Robert T. Browne going off to college, I envisioned him traipsing through a leafy campus with stately buildings and a well-stocked library. But in 1900, Samuel Houston College was still in its infancy. Only 40 years ago, it had been illegal for a black man to read or write. And now that the Civil War was over, African Americans were determined to make up for lost time. When Browne and the other 83 members of the class of 1904 arrived to begin the fall semester, the school's main building was falling apart. Birds could be found nesting in the rafters. Pigs and goats slept in the basement. There was no kitchen, no dining hall, no dishes, and no furniture. Nor was there any money in the budget for desks or chairs. The college's founder, R.S. Lovingood, recalled, "The students sat on trunks while I gave them a lecture. Our first meal was a jug of molasses and 14 loaves of bread." According to an official history of the college, there had been, quote, "considerable opposition on the part of certain white people to the school. Some hard feeling and some definite persecution grew out of that fact." In the midst of these trying times, a faculty meeting was held, the college history continues. Faculty and students were urged to speak no unkind word and to refrain from any rash act. In this crisis, the present motto of the school was adopted: "Strive always to treat others better than they treat you." The persecution referred to in the college history was not to be taken lightly. In 1900 alone, 106 black people were lynched across the country, murdered in cold blood by mobs in the North as well as the South. After graduation in 1904, Robert T. Browne took a job as an assistant teacher at Samuel Houston College and began the daunting task of training black teachers. Also teaching at the college that year was a 21-year-old girl from Corsicana, Texas. Millie Dupree Adams was the daughter of a black father and a biracial mother from Louisiana. She's described as mulatto in the 1900 census, and it's likely she was a light-skinned woman with Caucasian features. Clearly, she caught Robert's eye, and the couple was married in Goliad, Texas on December 29, 1904. By 1906, Robert and Millie were teaching school in Milliken, Texas. The conditions in Texas's segregated rural schools were primitive. All children sat in the same room regardless of grade level. Parents routinely kept their children out of school during planting and harvesting seasons, and to make matters worse, there was little or no job security. Many teachers spent the summer worrying whether they would be rehired in the fall. Perhaps this was the reason Robert's mentor, R.S. Lovingood, encouraged his students to, quote, "cultivate the spirit of the martyr." Robert T. Browne was young, he was ambitious, and he was a genius. It must have tried his patience severely to deal with the ignorance not only of his students, but of his colleagues. He may have been teaching and living in a sleepy Texas backwater, but Robert Tecumseh Browne knew that he was meant for bigger things. The birth of his son, Robert Jr., in October of 1906 would have given Browne even more incentive to better his economic situation. In 1907, Browne decided to take the civil service exam. Although the idea of testing an applicant's fitness for work in the federal government was still relatively new, African Americans had been quick to seize the opportunity. In 1890, the Federal Civil Service Commission stated that the new merit-based system would be a, quote, benefit to the colored race, allowing blacks, quote, the chance to enter government service on the merits in fair competition with white and colored alike. Of the 100,000 people who took the civil service exam between 1907 and 1908, less than half were offered jobs. Among this fortunate minority was Robert T. Browne. The 1910 San Antonio Directory lists him as living on Dawson Avenue and working as a clerk for the U.S. Army Quartermaster Depot at Fort San Houston in San Antonio. When I contemplated the obstacles that Browne must have faced growing up in the segregated South, I was awed, first of all, by his determination and by his ability to rise above all that. When I asked people who had met him whether he had ever spoken about his childhood or his experiences, I was surprised. They said he rarely talked about either one. He rarely mentioned race, and he never referred to slavery at all. I was really surprised. And in fact, when I dug into earlier times in his life, I learned that far from being quiet on the subject of race, Browne had actually been an extremely outspoken Black militant. In episode 2, I'm going to go into a little bit about Browne's life in New York during the Harlem Renaissance, the people he met, and the things he did as a writer and journalist. This is Carolyn Wilkins. Thank you for watching.